honored really to present my friend and colleague from the University of Jordan, Professor Zakaria Abu Hamdiya. If I'm going to talk more about him, I think I need more than 15 minutes, which is the time for his presentation. He's well known as a sociolinguistics in Jordan and abroad. I can promise you, and I can guarantee that this talk, his talk today, may be about gap fillers, Dr. Zakaria, or okay, is going to be quite informative and interesting. So, Dr. Zakaria, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. I feel glad to have such a learned audience, students, colleagues, and students. The title of my presentation is, well, let me see. Let me put it this way, as discourse marker phrases. These have been described in the literature as markers of hesitation, that is, the speaker is not really sure what they are saying, or non-fluency features, that is, the speaker has some problem in the expression of the ideas. Others consider them as fillers in moments of silence while the speaker is thinking on the next point. Others say, no, this is just like revision online, as you are doing chatting. You say something and then you have a change of mind, so you go back. This is all true. This is all true. But I think we can find instances in everyday practice of language use, other aspects of such thinking. The summary of my presentation, these are the parameters. First, functions of language use. Second, functions of rhetoric. And third, and this is my contribution here, is the reverse functions of language use and rhetoric. Now we are human beings who are of speaking age and ability, because some people are old but they don't have the ability of speaking, are experts of varied level of competence in language use and also in rhetoric. Now, I'll talk a little later about what I mean by rhetoric. Research on these aspects has been systematized in more than one field, in sociolinguistics, in discourse analysis, in conversation analysis, and also in verbal interaction or interactionist sociolinguistics. In the remaining minutes available to me, I would like to show how the normal common goals of speech are twisted and flouted and ignored intentionally, and also how the aims of speech are redirected, in this case, in order to achieve something else, which is also socially agreed. That is why we have social agreement on what makes a good speech. We also have social agreement on what makes a good speech on nonsense. First, functions of language use. I'm saying language use, I'm not saying functions of language. No. Functions of language use are different from functions of language. Functions of language is used as an instrument, that is the utilitarian purpose, or it is used as a symbol of identity of the individual, of the group, or of the nation. Now, the functions of language, one is the referential. You pass on information, facts, figures, falsehoods, imaginary, abstract, real, unreal, truths, lies and all kinds of things. This is what we call the referential or the informative. So even if when you say, well, the moon is made of blue cheese, this is wrong, but this is information, but it is wrong information. Another function is establishing and or maintaining social relationships of one type or another. And fourth is the use of language as for combating unwanted silence. There are moments when silence is everything. That is, silence is wanted. And in some cultures, like the culture of the Inuits in what we call Alaska, what you used to call the Eskimos, silence, particularly among females, is a way of lecturing others without verbal behavior. And finally, performing acts. That is, you do something. When you say, I name this ship Queen Elizabeth II, or I now pronounce you husband and wife, you may kiss the bride. Second, functions of rhetoric. Now, rhetoric is the use of verbal features, diction, coherence, cohesion, logical organization, and also non-verbal elements to do or to achieve. First, to convince the audience that you see, etc., of the point of the argument under discussion, and or win the support of the audience, and or refute the opponent's argument by showing its, that is the argument's, weaknesses, or their, that is the opponent's, weaknesses for this particular thing. Now this is the background where researchers on their speeches like Grice and others, the felicity conditions, Grice principles of cooperation. So when I say, do you have a watch? You answer me, it's 9 o'clock. You don't simply say yes and turn away. Now the reversal, and this is the point I'd like to focus on, that is there are conditions where the above functions for language use and rhetoric are twisted, they are flouted, they are violated, and also by institutional means. That is, you're supposed to do this in this particular context. And I have two examples. One in legislative bodies like the House of Representatives, the Senate, the Parliament, by whatever name this is called. And second, in top-ranking politicians' use of language, CEO, chief executive officers, and candidates aspiring for such offices and positions. And these two things are, one is filibustering. Filibustering is a parliamentary procedure by which the minority try to kill a proposed law by spending most of the time talking until the deadline for voting on the proposed bill has passed. Number two is obfuscation, and that is, now for people who are in computer programming, now we have something which is called obfuscator, and that is a program that is concerned with increasing computer security so that hackers have a problem getting to it. Now, the institutional talk, that is the talk at the university, the talk in the parliament, the talk in the Senate, and so forth, there are basic elements. One, we have participants engaged in some form of discussion, but there is a formal relationship. By formal, we mean there is a form. One is speaking, two are listening. One is speaking, 100 are listening. Two, and there are constraints which are enforced on who can talk and when and how much that person can talk. Three, there are frameworks and guidelines on how to interpret speech in such cases. And finally, there are deadlines. There are deadlines on voting. So if the deadline passes by, then voting take place. The goal of filibustering is doing this. In fact, this is called the bill or the law, the proposed law is called talked out. A bill killed in this way is described as talked out. The first example reported in the history of politics comes from Roman history. The General Cato the Younger wanted to block Julius Caesar's application for becoming a consul. And he was the general who has just conquered Spain. And according to the rules of the Roman Senate, he cannot do both. He would either have to do this or do that. That is, become a consul or remain as a general and then get into the city. But he could not get into the city and be voted a consul. So Cato spoke and spoke and spoke until nightfall. According to the rules of the Senate, everything should be finished by dusk. So he continued talking until nightfall, and then Julius Caesar had to give up being a consul. We also have a recent one, and this happened on June 23rd, June 25th. This is about 4 months ago, 2011, in Canada. The majority, the Conservative Party, wanted to pass a bill or a law which would require striking post-employees to go back to work. But the National Democratic Party, who were in minority, could not get to oppose the law simply by voting, because they were a minority, and they opposed it on the basis that if this law was passed, this would undermine the rights of people of collective bargaining. So members of the National Democratic Party led a filibuster and talked continuously for 58 hours, non-stop, no sleeping, no eating. However, if it were in a committee, they would give them breaks for eating and sleeping. And the deadline passed without voting on the bill, and the bill was also killed. In the United States Senate, this happens much more than it happens in the House of Representatives. So we have, the Senate and the House of Representatives both make what we call Congress. In the Senate, there is no time limit, there is no topic limit on what you can talk and continue to talk. So in fact, in one case, a member of the minority, who were defeated, if there was going to be a vote, they would be defeated, they would be outvoted. So what he did was just talk and talk and talk until he ran out of topics. What he did was order one of his assistants to get the telephone directory book and started reading names until it was the time for voting had already passed away. So although we expect people to be talking sense in filibustering, no, you're not talking sense. Obfuscation. Track of my time. It's honoring the audience by talk, but not necessarily a comprehensible answer. And this happens when top politicians do not want really to say what they must say to the public. So here we have a reporter who was asking a top-ranking official a very tough questions, and the official said, "I haven't heard the question." So the reporter, in simple innocence, he said, "Sir, I'd be happy to repeat the question." But the politician said, "I'd be glad to repeat the answer." In other words, the politician was indirectly refusing to answer him. Another example, also in the same country, we have a top politician in the top brass those who are decision makers. And he said, and then he named the superior, didn't lie to Congress. X, another top official, didn't lie to Congress. Y, another one, didn't lie to Congress. I didn't lie to Congress. We were all wrong. Now you can see how it goes. A final example from the same politician. He was asked whether key members of the government had known that staging a war, and you know what war, was based on false or inaccurate reports. And his answer was, there are known unknown. There are known knowns. There are things we know we know. We also know there are known unknowns. We know there are some things we don't know. But there are also unknown knowns. The ones we don't know, we don't know. So you can see that in obfuscation, okay, you get an answer, but you get no information. The objective is to confuse. That is, not to be cooperative in discourse analysis. It have not to be. You flout the rule. It's just like you said, do you know what time it is? And you answer, yes. This is being not cooperative. Thank you for being such good listeners.
Well, you see, let me put it this way. I hate to really move to the other speaker without giving a chance for my dear audience to ask questions. That was really very interesting, as I said before, very informative. So we will save the questions later. And now let me move to the second speaker, Dr. Ahmed Abdul Sheikh. Dr. Sheikh is an associate professor of linguistics and translation at Zarqa University. He wrote a word which I can guess what it means, but actually I don't know exactly what it means. He is on secondment. Secondment, I don't know this word. From Alexandria University. And he's a specialist in translation. That was in his MA thesis and in his doctorate thesis, translation. His latest research is in the field of translation, sociolinguistics, discourse analysis, and all of these things were published in international refereed journals. Today, now he's going to talk about the political hero figure in Egyptian songs, a linguistic reading Gamal Abdel Nasser, a case study. Dr. Sheikh, of course, comes from Egypt.
Okay. Well, I try to keep exactly to my 15 minutes as much as possible. Okay. Our talk today, the political hero figure in Egyptian songs. It's a linguistic reading with Gamal Abdel Nasser as a case in point. Okay, now, of course, we can't take a long time, even actually writing the actual research paper. We can't deal with all songs written and or sung for Abdel Nasser, so we have chosen a sample. The sample material is as follows. Okay, I would like somebody to help with. Okay. First of all, the topic of the research. The present paper deals with the political hero figure in Egyptian songs from a linguistic perspective. Objective of the research: the researcher attempts to cast some light on the development of the political hero figure in Egyptian songs, with particular reference to Jamal Abdel Nasser as a case in point. Okay. Method of the research: the researcher adopts an analytical approach, or at least claims to adopt one, and tries to make use of linguistic techniques offered by discourse analysis, or again, the researcher claims to try to do so. The hypothesis of the research. The basic hypothesis of this research is that even merely grammatical features are hardly confined to mere structures and morphological relations. They may, and actually sometimes at least do, reveal some significant facts about the topic in question. Scope of the research: this is what I said, the present research is confined to the study of Egyptian songs dealing with late Jamal Abdel Nasser as a case in point of a political hero figure in the period from 1952 to 1967 of Nasser's national project, not only in Egypt but across the whole Arab world. The songs I'm going to deal with are 3 songs. They are only 3, and yet they are quite representative of most songs written about Abdel Nasser during the period of time I am going to deal with. The researcher aspires to trace the historical development of such a national figure across different periods of time that may reflect the political ups and downs in Nasser's life, as well as help gain a better understanding of the possible causes and consequences of the rise and fall of Nasser's national project. The 3 periods of time. First, we start with early days, and I think you have 3 papers. I try to distribute a handout. The first one, before 1954. Actually, in 1952-53, the song goes: احنا الشعب واخترناك من قلب الشعب، يا فاتح باب الحرية يا ريس يا كبير القلب. We are the people, we are the people, we have chosen you from among the people. The translation is going to be literal because I'm going to comment on grammatical features. Now, this is in the early days, okay? Now, there is no mention here of the name of the leader or the hero. And the hero here is in the accusative. And the people, الشعب, is in the nominative. It's the people who have chosen him. It's true, it's the song goes on to say, يا فاتح باب الحرية, you the opener of the gate to freedom, يا رئيس كبير القلب, chief or boss, kind-hearted boss. Yet the hero figure is simply not in the nominative. Is not in the a subject, but an object. And it's also worth noting that there is no use of proper nouns in the lyrics of this song at all. There is no reference to the name of the political hero figure in question. Okay, now that was before 1954. With 1954, with the rise of the star of Nasser, we witnessed the rise of Nasser's star as a political hero and a victorious leader. Exactly after a few events, among which the following 3 stand as obvious landmarks that have extremely enhanced Nasser's popularity, not only within Egypt, but across the entire Arab world as well. The first thing was the Manshia attempt to assassinate Nasser. And Nasser survived the assassination attempt, and yet went on to deliver his speech hysterically, and he appeared then as such a mythological figure that wouldn't try to look for his own safety or secure his own safety, but would go on, although he had just been shot. And the audience, the people around, they were fascinated. They even disregarded completely the shift in the style and focus of attention in Nasser's speech before and after the shooting. Before the shooting, Nasser was talking about himself as a typical Egyptian, as only representative of the Egyptian people, only because he's an Egyptian like them. But after the shooting, and after he hysterically asked everybody to stick in their place, فَلْيَبْقَ كُلٌّ فِي مَكَانِهِ فَلْيَبْقَ كُلٌّ فِي مَكَانِهِ, he started saying that they want to kill Abdel Nasser. And notice the reference to himself in the, at the third person, not me. Because Abdel Nasser, I am the one who has taught you to be proud. I am the one who has implanted dignity in you. أنا الذي علمتكم العزة. أنا الذي غرست فيكم الكرامة. Now, this is completely different from the language he used before the shooting. It's as if after the shooting, he lost his temper and he became more of himself rather than the diplomatic politician who is trying to choose his word. And then came also the nationalization of the Suez Canal, the political victory of after the 1956 war. It was a great political victory, and then the culmination was with what? Was with the union between Egypt and Syria at the request of late Shokri Kawatli, the Syrian president, and then all this ignited the dream of a one unified Arab nation that would actually stand tall among all other powers, major powers of the world. And then the song, now start out the Halim Hafiz, the young singer, then it's this time Abdul Wahab, a very famous and renowned singer, and there you have the song there. بطل الثورة احنا معاك، انت حمانا واحنا فداك، انت حبيبنا يا جمال وانت نصرنا يا جمال. بطل hero of the revolution, we are with you. Now, hero of the revolution. So here it is, the hero is a subject, it is the nominative. And all the people are also on the nominative. One hand and the other hand. He is equal to all the people. We are with you. You are our protector, and we sacrifice our lives for you. It goes on even to depict Nasser as if Nasser were the long-awaited prophet. احنا جينا لك من اجيال، جيت في ميعادك بعد ما طال، واحنا جينا لك من اجيال. Okay, now time passes, and the hero now is not the product of his own people, but he is the protector, the beloved, and the supporter of them. Note also the use of the proper noun, not the proper noun exactly, but an adjective is Nasserna. The proper noun Jamal, this is the proper noun of the man, meaning beauty, but Nasserna is an adjective used here. He is our supporter. Notice that in Arabic, strictly speaking, Abdul Nasser, that's his name, is the slave of the supporter, in which case this is God Almighty. Now this is Nasserna. Now time passes, and before the 1967 tragic and catastrophic and also farcical war, before the 1967, what have we got? We have Nasser as a typical absolute ruler for the country. The dream of democracy has totally faded away. Nasser is idolized, made almost a demigod. Abdul Halim Hafiz again sings for Nasser, sings about Nasser. The song with the chorus of young kids at the very beginning deals with Nasser not as a man, not as a human being, but almost as an abstraction. And that's the third song, the third paper you have with you. ناصر يا حرية يا وطنية يا روح الأمة العربية يا ناصر. Literally speaking, Nasser, you who are freedom. Nasser, you who are patriotism. Nasser, you who is the spirit or the soul of the Arab nation. So with all this, what else do we expect? We idealize the man. So what's the result? Note that this song, the nickname of Nasser is used all through. And Nasser, and not Abdel Nasser. Nasser, he's almost replacing you know, the role of a God. And so what was that simply a coincidence? It's also Nasser Salah ad-Din. Now, okay, maybe it is, maybe it is not. But in any case, what was the inevitable result of all this? Of the idolization of our leaders. That's the result. 1967, and no comment. That's the tragic and farcical war both at the same time that has almost marked the end of a pan-Arabist dream for a whole generation of Arabs and not only Egyptians. Yet, does this mean that these songs simply depict the change in Nasser from a simple young man, from a patriot, you know, who loved his country, to a dictator? Well, I beg to disagree. I think it works both ways. That is, I think, as much as these songs depict the change in the character, they also help the man Abdel Nasser was to change and to turn into the dictator he had become. We, by idolizing our leaders, turn them into dictators. Both of us bear the responsibility. And to end up, a long story short, I may end up by quoting a few lines from Ahmad Abdel Mu'tah Hdaji, the Arab poet from Egypt, who said in Arabic, but then so say it in English, من ترى الآن يحمل عبء الهزيمة فينا. After Abdel Nasser's death. المغني الذي طاف يبحث للحلم عن جسد يرتديه، أم هو الملك المدعي أن حلم المغني تجسد فيه؟ هل خدعت بملكك حتى حسبتك صاحبي المنتظر، أم خدعت بأغنيتي فانتظرت الذي وعدتك به ثم لم تنتصر، أم خدعنا معا بسراب الزمان الجميل. What's the end? Well, I hope it will be a new beginning. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmed. I should really congratulate you on this charismatic speech. يعني أنت ممكن تكون شيخ شباب ربيع مصر. Now I move to our third speaker, Dr. Rafid al-Rubay'i, who is an assistant professor at Erbil National University. His main research interests include translation, media, religious and legal translation. Dr. Rubay'i, تفضل.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum, all of you. I'm going to take you now from speech to legal speech. My paper is entitled Stylistic Variation in the Translation of Legal Texts from Arabic into English, unidirectional, it is this direction from Arabic into English, towards a more reliable pedagogy. Because of time limitation, I'm going to skip some of the slides I've already prepared. I'm going to move directly to identify legal language. Legal language is something very well known to all of you. Legal language is the distinctive variety used in the legal documents, contracts, agreements, petitions, wills, etc. Legal language has been formed through a long time of use by legal circles until this use has come to be considered established formulas. This variety is characterized by a number of distinctive features which are well understood and familiar to its users, but awkward to ordinary people. These features are mostly on the lexical and syntactic level. Now, after that, I move to discuss what legal translation is. How can I move it this way? Yeah. I come to translate in legal language. The approaches to legal translation have been mostly text-oriented, that is, literal or static. because a legal text is considered an authoritative text. And any authoritative text, the letter in this text is very important. It has to be preserved cross-linguistically. For this reason, the approaches that have characterized legal translation are literal and static. This is mainly motivated by the assumption that legal texts are sensitive since they deal with substantive provisions in the form of obligations, permissions, authorizations, and prohibitions, all of which are enforceable by law. Thus, any change in the letter may lead to misinterpretation, which will in effect lead to the loss of rights included in the text. The proponents of this approach are Teresma, for example, in 1999, who states that legal language often strives towards great formality. It naturally gravitates towards archaic language. He moreover sees that this conservatism of the legal language is vital for safety and convenience. That is, to avoid the troublesome changes of legal meaning. Other proponents of this trend are Crystal and Bailey, who write, what has been tested and found adequate is better not changed. A challenge to this trend appeared or began in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Sarsevik 2024. This change is towards a more flexible attitude, characterized by recipient-orientedness. That is, from focus on the text to focus on the reader of the text, on the recipient. This shift is driven by the need to bridge the gap between the legal field and the people at large. This new trend escalated in the 70s and 90s. In what follows, representative examples of change at the lexical as well as syntactic levels are stated. Concerning the lexical level, this section is divided into 3 subsections. One for technical terms in general, the second one for doublets and triplets, and the third one are for archaic adverbs. Now, concerning technical terms, this section is in fact should be divided. This section should in fact be divided into 2 subsections, into purely technical terms and semi-technical terms. This is well known in the literature of legal language and legal translation. What is meant by purely technical terms? It refers to the terms that are used entirely in the legal field. For example, when we say power of attorney, this term is used in the legal field but not outside legal field. But semi-technical terms are used in the legal field as well as outside the legal field. For example, if you take the word maintenance, maintenance in the legal field means nafaqat, but outside the legal field it means siyana. Pay attention to the following. Take, for example, the word muqaddimah. Muqaddimah was used as a preamble in any legal text, was used as a preamble. Nowadays, there's more tendency towards using the word introduction, not a preamble. And introduction is a general word. It is a sort of functional usage. Musadaq alayh, authenticated, was the technical term that is used for this purpose. Nowadays, approved, and approved can be used in ordinary language. Bara'at dhimma was used, clearance was used to indicate bara'at dhimma. Nowadays, discharge is used for bara'at dhimma. Muddat al-ijab, lease term, a very technical term. Nowadays, period of lease, period of rent, and period of rent is, by the way, more functional, more general, less technical. Lease term is more technical. Period of lease, less technical, but more technical than period of rent. Period of rent is a rather general word. Al-mustajir, lessee, which is of French origin. Nowadays, tenant, and tenant is a general word used. Ikhtilas, embezzlement, as a technical term used for ikhtilas. Nowadays, pilferage. Pilferage is a word that is used very commonly to refer to stealing or something like that. Hasan al-sira wal-suluk, good conduct, very technical. One cannot predict it. Hasan al-sira wal-suluk, one cannot predict it unless he is familiar with this technical term. However, nowadays, good morals, good behavior are used in everyday English. Haythu anna, usually a legal text begins with haythu anna to give the reason behind drafting this legal text. Whereas, this was the technical word used. Nowadays, since is used. Irth, legacy was used. But nowadays, inheritance, which is a general word, is used. بموجب الوكالة, pursuant to the power of attorney, which is quite legal. No one can predict or expect it unless he is well familiar with the legal language. Nowadays, according to power of attorney, or in accordance with the power of attorney, these terms are more general. This is as far as the technical terms are concerned. As for doublets and triplets, doublets is a term that is used in the legal field to refer to collocations. These are synonyms and near synonyms used in the legal sphere. They include functionally redundant elements. Some elements are put only for legal decoration or something like that. Accordingly, there is a growing tendency to simplify them through omitting some parts or replacing others. For example, omitting some parts, take the following example. شروط العقد, terms and conditions. ما هي شروط, terms شروط وconditions شروط. Nowadays, they use the word conditions alone. And some are use the word terms alone. Right? Instead of terms and conditions together. One of them is considered enough. يقر ويعترف, confirm and acknowledge. Once he confirms, he acknowledges. That is why acknowledge is omitted. لاغيا وباطلا, very technical, null and void. لاغيا وباطلا, for example, a contract or something like that. Nowadays they use the more general word invalid. إشغال المأجور واستعماله, occupying and using. Who using means occupying is using. That is why they use using alone. This is as far as doublets and triplets are concerned. Let's come to archaic adverbs. What is meant by archaic adverbs? According to Al-Kazar and Ibrahim, to archaic adverbs are a mixture of dialectic elements, here, there, and where, with certain prepositions of, after, by, under, etc. These two have undergone change towards a more general, less technical use of language. These adverbs are either substituted with common everyday English or omitted altogether. For example, استعمال المأجور بالصورة وبالطريقة المطابقة والمحددة في العقد. Using the leased property as determined herein. This is a quite technical term. Nowadays, it is substituted by using the leased property as specified in this contract. In this contract is a more general expression used. Or omitting it altogether. For example, تشهد جامعة إربد الأهلية, this certificate of experience. Irvin National University hereby certifies. Nowadays, there is a general tendency towards removing or omitting hereby. So we say Irvin National University certifies, or this is to certify. There's no need for hereby, and it is well understood. This is the way used in legal text drafted in English. As for the syntactic level, this level is less noticeable in the legal field than the lexical level. However, legal documents use a certain prescribed set of structures. See Al-Jarif and the crystal and date for this purpose. Al-Jarif put a good number of well-established structures for this purpose. At the present, there is a growing tendency towards a freer use of structures. For example, استلم المؤجر المأجور. The lessee has received the rented property. This is this is the sentence that was typically used in legal documents. Nowadays, you can say the leased estate has been taken over by the lessee. I mean, the passive instead of the active interchangeably without causing any problem. Although the active voice was somehow a holy or something sacred that cannot be altered. But nowadays there is a change. استلم المؤجر المأجور سالما من كل عيب في الأبواب والشوابيك والزجاج والأقفال. With intact doors, windows, I mean attributive adjectives. Whereas in the past, only predictive adjectives was used. With all doors, window frames, window doors completely intact. عند انتهاء مدة الإجارة إذا لم يجدد العقد كما هو مذكور في هذا البند, unless the contract is renewed as mentioned in this article upon the expiry of so-and-so. At the expiry of the period of use, which is called the fronting. So there is a freer way of using the structures. This has implications, pedagogical and others, but pedagogical implications are more important. In the light of the previous discussion, a number of implications are stated down. The static nature of the English legal language is getting increasingly questionable. There is a growing tendency towards a more flexible legal language, more intelligible to the general public. Rather, technical terminology is being substituted by a plainer terminology, or a plainer one. Pedagogically, legal translation courses should be reconsidered in terms of stylistic analysis as well as ways of translating such texts. The new shift in attitude should be traced and incorporated in the course syllabus. This has also put a burden on the course instructors of following up these new changes in the legal language so as to acquaint their students with up-to-date trends in this respect. Number 3, the sources and references used for teaching legal translation should be reconsidered in the light of new shifts in attitude and practice. The internet can be a very good source for getting recent texts drafted in English. The instructor, moreover, should familiarize the students with the possible alternatives of the expression at hand. I mean, I do recommend here that it is not recommended for a legal translation instructor to give his students, for example, this is the terminology that we use and that's it. He must give the variants, the possible variants. A continuously updated glossary is recommended in this respect. Such a step has been initiated by Adil Azzam Saqf al-Hifz in his book, The Reliable Guide to Legal Translation. This book was published in 2009. In this book, the author has compiled a mini legal dictionary at the end of the book. Number 4, in a translation, this is important, the source text exercises a powerful impact. This is significant. For Arabic and English legal varieties, display differences, with the latter being more flexible in accepting the shift. This does not mean that Arabic is entirely reluctant to change. For example, endorsement used to be expressed by the highly technical tajir. The word tajir was used for endorsement. Nowadays, it is being replaced by tabhir. Tabhir is more understood than tajir, because tabhir, it is very well understood that it is a sort of writing the name and signing at the check at the back of the check. Finally, as for the labor market, various accredited for translating legal text should reconsider their work procedures. Ready-made texts saved on the computer can no longer be a valid method. Various instead should enroll their staff in courses offered by the concerned parties to acquaint them with up-to-date trends in legal language and subsequently legal translation. Thank you very much for watching.
Thank you, Dr. Rubey. We have learned a lot actually from your presentation, and we will be waiting for questions from the audience later on your presentation and our friends. Okay, now I move to the fourth speaker, Dr. Ghada Alawi. Dr. Ghada received her BA and MA from Yarmouk University. She received her PhD from Indiana University of Pennsylvania in English Literature and Criticism in 2005. Currently, she is an assistant professor at Yarmouk University and she teaches courses on American literature. She published a book entitled The Femme Fatale in American Literature. Her research interests are 19th and 20th American literature, specifically American realism and naturalism. Yes, please.
Questions? No questions?
Afterwards.
After this.
It gives me great pleasure to be speaking here among my colleagues and among my professors, Dr. Of course, I'm not going to talk about something as grand as global linguistic globalization. I'm going to be very specific, and I'm going to take you to Harlem. And we are going to talk about one of the writers of the Harlem Renaissance, who started out her career skyrocketing. She did a great job. She wrote the first novel, Quicksand, and she received critical acclaim. She received an award for her first novel. And then she wrote her second novel, which is Passing, which is the one I'm going to talk about. Unfortunately, however, after she wrote Passing, she was accused of plagiarism, and that's what ended her career. So basically, when we talk about Nella Larson, she's one of the lesser-known American writers of the 20th century. She is a writer of the Harlem Renaissance, but we only have 2 books produced by this writer, one of which I am going to talk about. Okay. Let me just start out by giving a brief synopsis of the novel. We have 2 major characters in the novel, Claire Kendry and Irene Redfield. And basically the novel is told from the point of view of Irene about Claire. They are 2 childhood friends who have lost touch after Claire's father has died. Claire moves in to live with her 2 white aunts. By hiding that Claire was part black, they allow her to pass as white, and then she marries a white racist. Irene lives in Harlem, marries a black doctor. The novel centers around the meeting of the 2 friends later in life. Both women are intrigued by the lifestyle of the other. Irene becomes paranoid that her husband is having an affair with Claire, and nothing is obvious about that. At a party, Claire's race is revealed to her husband, who is of course a racist, and the novel ends with Claire's sudden death by falling out the window. The word passing itself, and this is where the title comes from, what it means is that this is a deception of the white race by the black race who decide for social or economic reasons to pass as members of the white race. And therefore we have the title Passing. We have 2 characters who pass, but in different ways. Previous scholarship has dealt, of course, with this novel in many respects. Some critics read this novel as an example of the classic plight of the tragic mulatto figure. And we know about the tragic mulatto figure. This is a figure that wavers in between 2 worlds, the black and the white, not fully belonging to the blacks, not fully belonging to the whites, always moving from one direction to another. So basically, this is how the novel has been read by so many critics. Other critics suggest that Irene and Claire mirror and complicate each other. One of them is living with the white community, another one is living with the black community, and therefore they act as a mirror to each other. Other critics suggest that the novel opens spaces for the creation or the destruction of new self-generated identities. And another way the novel is read is by looking at it from a psychoanalytic point of view, in that the relationship between the women is one based on depression. What I do in my paper is that I offer a naturalistic reading of the novel. And naturalism itself is a movement that started in the late 19th century in American literature. And basically when we talk about naturalism, we talk about individuals who are helpless products of heredity and the social environment, motivated by strong drives from within and harassed by social and economic pressures from without. These characters literally have no freedom of choice, no potential for growth, none whatsoever. Man, in those writings, is caught in a net from which there can be absolutely no way out, no escape, controlled completely by the 2 dominant factors who represent environment. The reading that I offer in my paper is a naturalistic reading, where Claire tries to break free from these constraints and make use and take advantage of her hybridity. Now, we all know by now that Claire herself is a hybrid character, and she wants to take advantage of her hybridity, make use of this to the extreme. Passing was her choice, marrying a white man was also her choice. Mingling with Irene, who is a representative of the black community, was also her choice. She wants, like any other character, to exercise her free will in the choices she makes. And in the process, she uses her hybrid nature. However, of course, because this is a naturalistic reading, she fears that heredity will overcome. She thinks that she is in control, but the naturalistic world is much stronger. Claire can be read as a free will determinist, and this is a term that's frequently used when it comes to naturalistic characters, a free will determinist. This is a character who wants to exercise to some extent free will, but at the same time it's determined and limited by all of the surrounding factors around her. In a conversation, for example, with some of the friends that she sits down with, she admits, when they were talking about children and how many children they have, Claire, this is Claire speaking, "No, I have no boys, and I don't think I'll ever have any. I'm afraid. I nearly died of terror the whole 9 months before Marjorie was born for fear she might be dark. Thank goodness she turned out all right. But I'll never risk it again. Never. The strain is simply too hellish." Okay? Of course, as a naturalistic character, she knows that heredity at one point will overcome. She tries to defy heredity. In whatever means she wants to fight back, but she cannot. Again, another example that I'm going to read from the novel. This is Claire's husband, who is a white person, and he's a white racist. And he's talking to the women of why he sometimes calls his wife as a nig, or nigger. As Claire's husband, John Billow, tells the ladies why he has come up with the nickname of Nig for his wife Claire, he jokingly explains, "When we first married, she was as white as a lily, but I declare she's getting darker and darker. Yet, menacingly, he threats that there will be no niggers in his family." So what happens in Claire's situation, and this is the main focus of my study, is that instead of hybridity serving her purposes, helping her to live in both worlds, it backfires against her and ultimately, of course, costs her her life. The naturalistic world creates and kills Claire Kendry. Heredity and environment have the upper hand. I'm just going to read 1 or 2 paragraphs from my paper. Claire's insistence on denying her true identity and her hereditary traits ultimately results in her downfall. Wavering in between the two worlds of blacks and whites does not, as she has anticipated, solve her problems, but rather complicates them and ends in her ambiguous death. Longing to be with the black people and mingling with them ultimately leads her husband to discover her true identity. Not being able to assimilate with the whites, Claire turns the opposite direction. The black-white dichotomy is the one she is caught in. In fact, Claire regrets her own choices. She chooses to pass as white, but when she becomes successful in her passing, she turns towards the black. Her individuality as a hybrid character can never be truly determined and fixed. This is the critical role that both heredity and environment play in Claire's life. In her efforts to escape their strong grip, Claire finds herself more and more suffocated. Exercising her free will in passing, she tries to defy heredity. Defying heredity, she encounters the social environment. Not finding herself in the surrounding white environment, she decides to exercise her free will again and mixes with the black community. Not finding herself completely in the black community, she again faces the constraints of the surrounding environment. Hence, Claire is defeated by the naturalistic world as it ultimately takes control of her, not vice versa as she has hoped. This is the major argument that I make in the paper. What I do basically is that I take it into a new direction by adding in the fact that this is a tragic mulatto figure entrapped in a naturalistic world. And
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Rada, for complying with the time. Our first speaker is Dr. Tahseen Ahmed Saleh, and Dr. Tahseen received his PhD from the University of Rajasthan in India in 1999 in translation. Now he is an assistant professor of English at the Department of Foreign Languages, Applied Science Private University, and floor is yours.
Today I'm going to speak about something which is not really new, the development of technologies, the use of machine or automated computers. Well, this is a project that I've been working on for the past 3 months or so. We're still trying to develop this system. And as a matter of fact, and as being a teacher of translation, we have noticed that students of translation are shifting from using paper dictionaries to using automated dictionaries in the past 1 decade or so. And in the last 1 year, I've noticed that students of translation are using iPhones and mobile phones, which have applications that they can speak through the iPhone, the mobile phone, and get the translation back in a few seconds. And as a matter of fact, every one of us looks forward to have more luxuries in life, regardless of what we have to do or how much we spend in order to obtain latest technologies. In the field of translation, for instance, it has been observed in the last 1 decade that a large number of students of translation replace their paper dictionaries with electronic ones. In fact, the fact that translation languages was both the earliest objective of an ever-widening field of interest has made it difficult to maintain an objective perspective for machine translation. And since translation is a creative process which involves interpretation of a given text by the translator, and because it's a difficult and expensive process, especially between Arabic and English, it is therefore necessary to work on a reliable and dependable system which is capable of providing constant responses to bridge the gaps between the languages. Moreover, it may be required to provide immediate responses in situations where human interpreters are scarce and difficult to accommodate for, such as people who go to war or in combats and engagements. In the case of the U.S. military in Iraq, or the U.S. forces in Iraq, speech-to-speech interpretation technology was deployed to enable military personnel to communicate with the local Iraqis in their own language. Two such systems that are considered in my research, namely IraqCom. And IraqCom is a system, it's a portable speech-to-speech translation system by SRI, International for Investigative Fielding in Iraq, which was first used and was found not compatible. Then came the developed version of the same system by IBM, that is Master, called Master. It's a multi-automatic speech-to-speech translation by IBM, which is designed to take spoken input from its users and convey the meaning of what is said in a translated speech. So here we speak of a different code altogether. A person speaks to a machine, and the machine responds with a voice. In fact, this is not my computer. That's why I want to show that this is a strange computer to me. Where my computer, I was not able to connect the internet on my computer, so I'm using a strange computer now which will not understand what I say after a while when I speak it. But I'll be showing you a demo of what I'm going to do. Now, most automatic speech-to-speech interpretation rely on pre-programmed and fixed phrases and not on a free-form conversation. Usually the system has to memorize predetermined phrases to serve a specific purpose or a specific field, such as soldiers, medical doctors, or maybe tourists or others. Now together we will watch the video and see how the system works in the situation where an officer tries to train the Iraqis to follow the commands and so on. Let's just watch a video together. I'm sorry because this is not my computer. I have not done a job on this computer, but it will come in a minute. I have to go to the video itself. It's not Okay, if we are able to get the sound here, then that would give an idea what's happening actually. This officer is asking an Iraqi few questions, and the answers to the questions, or the translation to the questions, are actually pre-translated and uploaded to a system, to a machine, where with the speech recognition programs, they are able, yes, is it okay now? Certain purpose, that is in Iraq. Now we consider another video where in a different field, notice here,
Do you have anything?
can you hear?
I Where does it hurt?
أين يؤلمك؟
معدتي تؤلمني.
My stomach hurts.
On a scale from 0 to 10, what's your pain like right now?
بقياس 0 إلى 10. 0 لا يوجد ألم، 5 وسط، 10 أسوأ ألم شعرت به. ما مقدار الألم الذي تشعر به الآن؟
الألم بدرجة 9.
It hurts like a 9.
And is your pain better or worse than before?
هل الألم أحسن أو أسوأ؟
أسوأ.
Worse.
Would you like some medication for the pain?
هل تريد دواء الألم؟
نعم من فضلك.
Yes, please.
Okay, I'll call the doctor.
سوف أتصل بالطبيب.
Okay, in this video we've noticed that all the questions were asked to an Arabic speaking patient through a cell phone. This technology is available right now. And the voices which were used when she spoke in English, actually we heard a voice of a human female who translated. That means the questions were actually translated and they are again limited in number. But when he spoke back, when he answered her, the voice was an assimilation of a male, a computer assimilation of a male voice, which was not pre-programmed because we do not know actually what would be the patient's answer. So we cannot account for pre-programmed answers as well. So let's just have a look at this question to show that this translation is actually not a translation which is done by a machine, but done by a human in the same video.
On a scale from 0 to 10, what's your pain like right now?
بقياس 0 إلى 10. 0 لا يوجد ألم، 5 وسط، 10 أسوأ ألم شعرت به. ما مقدار الألم الذي تشعر به الآن؟
Observe that the Arabic output was not automated interpretation of the question asked. لاحظنا ايش هو السؤال؟ We noticed what was the question about the pain and she mentioned the scale. But actually she didn't go into detail where the translation, the Arabic translation went into detail, but was rather an explanation of what was intended to be asked. The original question made no mention of the degrees of pain, من 1 إلى 10, on a scale of 1 to 10, that's what she said, of pain, which was explained by a human female voice in the Arabic output, that she mentioned in details that from 1 to 10 is this, and from 10 to, she explained it in details. Now in my project, or what we are trying to do right now, is actually to connect few programs together, because the service is made available free of charge for the users of Windows 7. There is a program called speech recognition, where the computer can train your computer actually to hear you and understand what you say. You can train your computer. That's what I did to my computer, which I'm not able to use today. You can train your computer to actually say that, say what you say, right, and it types it out. So what I intend to do, or what I'm working on right now, is to make this program connected to another one through Visual Basic 8, or maybe more advanced programs, to connect it to a translator, which I'm using right now is Google Translate, because it provides translation, immediate translation, and voice-to-voice translation. That I'll be showing you in a minute. But before that, I'd like to just say a few words about what are these softwares, the speech recognition technology, speech-to-speech conversation over the internet with someone who does not speak your language is the latest service provided by many social network websites such as Facebook and Twitter. Using speech recognition programs, users are able to perform unlimited free text-to-speech translations with most organic output voices in many languages. Recent advances in technologies have made speech recognition more user-friendly, yet the technology is making slow but steady improvements. The speech recognition programs which have been available for more than a decade, are often used to replace typing, where users rely on a keyboard to enter information. That's what we do. Usually people, I speak about people who are not used to using computers. They have a problem with the keyboard locating the letters and what. If you can train your computer, you can really speak with, and it types quicker than what you do as a professional using keyboards. Now, because of the time that everyone complains about the time limit here, I'm going to try and show you what exactly is happening in our project.
Can you do it in 1 minute?
Yes, in 1 minute, sir. So I'm going to speak to this computer, but as I said earlier, this computer is totally strange to me. It might not recognize my voice. So what you're going to see here, maybe something not what I actually tell the computer to type, and I'm going to give a command to the computer to translate, and then we hear the translation, which is not really very accurate in this case. But of course, if we really look for a better programs, which is available, if we go to buy it, because these are all free downloaded programs. So if we look for more expert programs, more professional programs, I think we can do the job we are looking for. Now, if I say to the computer, using the technology, which is provided speech recognition, start. So now the computer is listening. Notice it's hearing my voice. It's going to type something. Start listening. This is all the noise. Of course, this will be case sensitive because it hears all the noise that comes. And I was trying, in fact, in order to program this computer, train it, but the noise which is coming from in the room, I couldn't really train it. Now I heard this. When I give the command to the computer again, notice it is staying up there, listening. So at that time, the computer will be listening to what you say. Now, let's say, start listening. Show numbers. Show numbers. Okay. Now, all this will be done through, as I said, Visual Basic, which we don't have to actually do this, but you have to only click on a button that says Translate. And
فقد لديه القدرة على الوصول إلى معظم الأسئلة الشائعة والجلسة تستمع آخر يقول من الإنصاف القول.
And this is what you get. Actually, you speak, and the output will be in a voice. Thank you very much, and I'm sorry for the inconvenience.
Very illuminating. Thank you, Dr. Hassin. Now, thank you for your patience. Yes. It's my pleasure to introduce Professor Dr. Abdul Sahib Mahdi Ali. Dr. Abdul Sahib is a professor of linguistics and translation at the University of Sharjah. He received his PhD degree in applied linguistics from the University of London in 1981. He was chairman of the Department of Translation and Al-Mustansariya University, Baghdad, for 12 years. He has a special interest in poetry translation, contrastive linguistics, and lexicography. He is the author of several books and many articles, including, I mentioned some of them, Encyclopedia of Translation Terminology in 2007, and a Dictionary of Translation and Interpreting in 2002, Linguistic Study of the Development of Scientific Vocabulary in Standard Arabic in 1987. He is the translator of Thinking Arabic Translation, which is a course in translation method, Arabic to English by James Dickens et al. 2002. The last one is Training Translators and Conference Interpreters by W.K. Weber in 1984.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. Well, as you said, being the last speaker, I think I deserve to be given more time. I'm greedy in terms of time. First of all, I'd like to thank Zaytuna University for organizing this conference and providing us with this valuable opportunity to meet and exchange expertise. Well, my paper, as I have already explained to the organizing committee, is not a paper in the conventional sense. It is part of a major translation project that I have been working on, and I hope to finish within a year, inshallah. This project consists in translating a large collection of famous English poems written by some of the most celebrated English poets like Shakespeare, Wordsworth, Emily Dickinson, Robert Frost, Thomas Hardy, and others, many others. So I don't know where to begin, in fact. These are the selected poems I was hoping to read, but I don't think I'm going to cover them all. I think you have a copy of them in the handout. Do you have it? Yes. Good. So I don't need to say what these poems are. You know, there are difficulties. Of course, it goes without saying that the translation of poetry is difficult. The translation of poetry is, in fact, a special case within literary translation. And it involves far greater difficulties than the translation of prose. And that is because poetry represents writing in its most compact, condensed, and heightened form. And form and content in poetry are inseparably linked. And there lies the difficulty of translating poetry into poetry. And that's why it is easier to translate poetry into prose. Poetry is also informed by a musical mode, or what we call the inner rhythm, regardless of whether there is any formal meter or rhyme. And this is an elusive characteristic which the translator is called upon to translate. In addition to that, the translator is expected to produce a text that is readable, enjoyable, a successful poem in the target language. The often insurmountable difficulties of translating poetry have led to the conclusion that poetry should be translated literally, and that poetry or translating poetry is impossible in so many cases. So many people have highlighted the idea that poetry is untranslatable, even poets themselves and translators themselves. Shelley, for example, is a famous translator. He said it's useless to translate poetry into poetry, but he himself translated poems from Latin, from Greek, from Spanish, and Italian. And Goethe, the great German writer and poet, said translating poetry is impossible, necessary, and important, which means, in fact, we should continue translating poetry. We cannot do without that. Robert Frost famously said, poetry is what gets lost in translation. But this, in fact, is true only when you look at a poem as a Renaissance painting, the original being always perfect, and any replica is a poor copy of it. But should we look at a poem like that always? Well, this is what we're going to try to do today in this presentation. And we shall have a look at I don't want to discuss, to go into detail about the theoretical aspect of translating poetry and the different methods involved in it, because this has been covered by some colleagues like Professor Abdullah and Professor Muhammad said translating poetry is a creative process. But very briefly, we have what we call the phonological translation, which is replacing the phonological system of the source text by its equivalent in the target language. We have literal translation, which puts emphasis on word-for-word translation, and it distorts the sense and meaning and the syntax of the original text. There is also the metrical translation, but we know that each language has its own meters. What we try to do is to find a meter that is equivalent or similar to the meter used by the original poet. Poetry into prose, this is quite common, but as I said, what about form? Form has to be also reproduced in the target language. We have famous translators like Ibrahim Jabr who translated Shakespeare's sonnets into prose, and many others, of course. Rhyme translation is quite difficult, as you will see now. I'll show you some examples. You have to use rhyme. And blank verse translation, this again very commonly practiced, and it is easier than the other types of translation. There is also interpretation, where we have two types, the versions and the imitations. Versions is a poem that is semantically similar but physically different from the original text. And imitations, where we have the only thing in common between the source language poem and the target language poem is the fact that it uses the same title and the same point of departure. You know what Peter Newman said about communicative and semantic translation, and this has been discussed this morning. I don't want to waste time on that. My strategy is, I believe that poetry is a form of language where form and content are inextricably linked, or rather fused into a single whole. And therefore only poems can translate poems. We shall try to give some examples to prove this. This is a poem by Emily Dickinson. She has written many beautiful and sad poems, but this is probably one of the more depressing poems. She says, "Heart, we will forget him. You and I tonight. You may forget the warmth he gave, and I will forget the night. When you have done, pray tell me, that I my thoughts may dim. Haste, lest while you lagging, I may remember him." Now, as you can see, the theme of this poem is about a woman who wants to forget the person she loved. And she's instructing her heart. She's almost giving a demand. And she's telling her heart what to do. It has to forget the warmth. And this is quite understandable, because the heart is the holder of emotions. And what she's going to forget is light. And light here, of course, doesn't have the physical meaning. There are two translations for it in Arabic, as you definitely know. There is dhaw and the nur. And there it's not used in the sense of dhaw, rather in the sense of nur, which this word and its derivatives in Arabic have such senses as illumination, clarification, explanation, enlightenment, and al-Quran al-Kalima. Allah nuru samawati wal ard. And then in the same verse you have yakadu zaytuha yudhi. Zayt, physical, so yudhi. So a translator has to pay attention to all these minute differences and meanings. And she says to her heart, she asks her heart to tell her immediately when it has carried out the act of forgetting, because she's afraid that if it takes the heart too long to forget, then she will have more time to remember the man one more time. I have tried to translate these poems, paying attention to the form and the content. And the form, also the rhyme scheme. I have followed the same rhyme. For example, here we have A, B, C, D, D, E, F, E. And my translation goes like this. أجل يا قلب ننساه كلانا هذه الليلة ستنسى دفئه أنت وأنسى نوره كله فإن أفلحت في النسيان أخبرني لأطفي جدوى الذكرى وأنساه وعجل ربما اللقاء يبغيني فأنسى أنني أنسى وأهواه. As you can see, we have the same rhyme scheme, A, B, C, D, D, E, F, E. A second poem is by Shakespeare, one of the most famous poems of Shakespeare, and perhaps one of the best illustrations of his theme of the ravages of time. And this sonnet, which is neatly organized in the quatrain, quatrain, quatrain couplet structure. It follows the rhyme scheme A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G. In the first stanza, life or the passing of time is compared to the incessant beating of the waves against the rocks along the seashore, with the force, with the force of each wave building in until it finally crashes down to be followed by yet another wave. In the second stanza, we have a metaphor of the sun, which is compared to human life. So the sun is born, it crawls into maturity, and it's crowned with maturity, until finally it falls into darkness or death. And the final line in this second stanza summarizes all this and says, and time that gave doth now his gift confound. Time gives the gift of life and takes it away. The same meaning or sentiment is expressed in the third one. Time destroys the perfection of life. It digs holes and wrinkles in the face of a beautiful person. It feeds on the best things in us, and nothing can stand but for his side to mow. Yet, in the final couplet, the speaker is speaking of his intention to defy time, to outsmart it by eternalizing the fine Lord, the addressee in his verse. So that's how it reads. Like as the waves make towards the pebbled shore, so do our minutes hasten to their end, each changing place with that which goes before. In sequent toil, all forwards do contend. Nativity, once in the daylight, crawls to maturity, wherewith being crowned, crooked eclipses, gains his glorified, and time that gave doth now his gift confound. Time doth transfix the flesh set on you, and doth the parallel in beauty's brow, feeds on the rarities of nature's truth, and nothing stands but for his sight tomorrow. And yet, to times in hope my verse shall stand, praising thy worth, despite the cruel hand. Now look at the word pebbled shore. I just want to give an idea about what translators sometimes do. Pebbled shore, as you know, ساحل مليء بالحصى. If we say ساحل مليء بالحصى والموصوف بالحصى راح تكون dictionary explanation of the word, not a poetic language. And time could be translated into الزمن. شادي الله يذكرها ويرحمها بالخير ويرحمها. أدوني عن الزمن. والله يا زمن، صحيح؟ لكن I translated it into الدهر. وهل يصلح العطار ما أفسد الداخل؟ والشارع المليء references to الدهر. And his side to Mao, this was very frequent in literature in the Middle Ages, and because death and time were often pictured carrying a side. But this is not the image we have in our literature. We have another image which I shall talk about when I read the translation. So, the translation. I don't want to show it to you because I want you to listen, and then we shall have a look at it. Okay. كالموج في جريه للشاطئ الحصب تمضي دقائقنا والعمر يختزل. كالموج في جريه للشاطئ الحصب تمضي دقائقنا والعمر يختزل. إذ موجة تختفي أخرى وفي دأب بعض يسابق بعضا علها تصل. أو إذ موجة تختفي أخرى بلا تعب بعض يسابق بعضا علها تصل. يأتي الوليد كقرن الشمس في الأفق حتى إذا ما ارتقى نحو الذرى حجب. إن الكسوف خصيم النور والألق والدهر يأخذ ما أعطى وما وهب. والدهر يسلكنا إشراقة العمر يستبدل الحسن بالتجعيد والهرم. يقتات مما بنا بالأنفس النظر لا شيء في مأمن من سيله العالم. لكن شعري بوجه الدهر ينتصب يغذيك عمرا بعمر الدهر يحتسب. So if you look at this is the translation I saw on the internet, and I don't want to reveal the name of the translator. It says كما تندع الأمواج صوب الشاطئ المرصوف بالحصى, which is the dictionary definition of the word pebble. وهكذا تهرول دقائقنا إلى نهايتها كل منها تحل محل سابقتها بعناء مستمر تتنافس كلها إلى الأمام. وبعدين he used also يعني unacceptable collocations, like for example خسوفات مقوضة. Have you ever heard of this? We haven't. والزمن الذي وهب يتلف الآن هباته. وبعدين في ندرات كائنات الطبيعة الكامل. هو المقصود بها يقتات مما بنا بالأنفس النظري. أفضل شيء في حياتنا هو الشباب والجمال دمر الزمن. Okay? وقال لا شيء يصمد أمام من جيله. ويعني he used the same image, but as I said this, كالموت في جري بالشاطئ الحصب تمضي دقائقنا والعمر يختزل. إذ موجة تختفي أخرى وفي دأب أو يعني he misunderstood the meaning of وفي دأب. He said بعناء. In sequent toil means patiently working hard for a long time بدون تعب. بدأ وفي دأب بعض يسابق بعضا على تصل. والاستعارة اللي استخدمتها أنا بدل من المنجل هي لا شيء في مأمن من سيله العالمي. قصيدة ثالثة لألفريد تينيسون. This one. Okay. So Alfred Tennyson is grieving the death of his best friend, Arthur Hallam, I think. And he's sitting at the sea, watching the sea and watching nature, and he is saddened by the fact that nature doesn't stop for a moment to grieve the absence of a dear person. Break, 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 and the repetition is very important. Break, break, break on thy cold grey stones, O sea. And I with that my tongue could utter the thoughts that arise in me. Oh well for the fisherman's boy that he shouts with his sister at play, oh well, for the sailor lad that he sings in his boat on the bay. And the stately ships go on to their haven under the hill. Oh, but oh, for the touch of a venged hand and the sound of a voice that's still. Break, break, break at the foot of thy crags, O sea, but the tender grace of a day that's dead will never come back to me. Now, if you see, if you look at the word stone in the second line of the first stanza and the word the crags, now he's sitting at the sea and he's grieving the absence of his friend, and this kind of feeling is escalating. And so when he reaches the last stanza, he uses the word the crags. Crags are also stones, but they have an Arabic special name, a jalmud or jalamid, which is harder than stones. يسفيون يا عراقي الصخر قلبك صخر جلمود ما حن عليه. The translation goes like this: تكسر 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 على صخرك البارد الأسود، ليتني يا بحر يسعفني فمي، فالأسى جم وطاغ كمدي. ابن الصياد يلهو فرحا ويباري أخته في اللعب، وصبي عند ذا البحار يجدو في سرور فوق متن القارب، وتواصل سيرها السفن المهيبة نحو مأواها الذي عند التلال. أين مني لمسة الكف الحبيبة، وصدى صوت تلاشى واستحال، تكسر 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 عند هاتيك الجلاميد القسية، غير أن الهمس يا بحر وما كان به من نعيم غاب عن عيني ولن يرجع إلي. Well, I was hoping to read the rest of the poems, but
Thank you, Dr. Abdul. You have just shown us that translation is composition, creation. It's not just rewriting.
creation.
Yeah, creation. So now the question answer period. Can we have all the questions directed at our colleagues here, and then each of the speakers will give you the answers. So please write down, my colleagues here, the questions. Yes.
Thank you very much for that answer presentation. Normally, I would like to shoot those linguists who used to touch poetry, but the first time that I have enjoyed really the translation. But I'd like to comment on what you have said, the blank verse translation. You said there will be a loss of meter. Then in this case there will be no blank verse, because blank verse used to follow meter. It is iambic pentameter. That is 10 syllables. The first is weak and the second is strong.
No,
this is one thing.
I said the prose translation, not blank verse. Prose translation.
And one thing more. Have you ever thought of the loss of meaning that might take place while translating poetry? Sometimes when we talk of poetry, one of the most important definitions of poetry is that poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feeling. It takes its origin from emotions recollected in tranquility.
Wordsworth.
Yes. Are you able to raise in yourself the same kind of emotion that the poet used to have while composing his poem, so that you can deliver similar kind of emotion there?
Excuse me, can we have very short comments, please? We don't have time. I'm sorry to say that, because we want to have as many questions as possible. So please, the last word is for you.
And one thing more, that Horace had said that the writer should imagine first, should see first imaginatively what he writes, and create a similar imagination in the reader's mind. Would the translator be able to do this while translating poetic work?
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, more questions, please. Yes.
Can I throw 3 questions to our supervisor and our professor? Dr. My professor, Dr. Abu Hamdiya, the first one. Then the second question is to Dr. Ahmed from Egypt. And the last one maybe to our poet here. If it is it possible for me to do that?
Quickly, please.
Yes. My professor, Dr. Abu Hamdiya, many thanks to you about what you have been introducing to us. But I want to ask really, if I could, about the ambiguity that within your talk. Is it related to the lack of competence and accuracy? And what is the role of the body language in that talk? This is the first. And to Dr. Ahmed from Egypt. Can I ask you, why didn't you quote President Abdel Nasser rahmatullah alayhi, his last speech before the Battle of 1967 when he wanted to leave his position? And did you believe the people who were sleeping at his house at that time because they loved him really, or because the president was able to manipulate his speech to him? The third one, to our Sha'arna al-Kabir. Do you believe, Doctor, the translator, any translator could do that if he doesn't have the sense of point? If he doesn't have the sense of point, or does the translator have a knowledge of saying poetry before he translates a poem into a poem? Many thanks.
Okay. Questions? Others?
I would like to, the last actually paper, or rather creative paper, was something really excellent that we should talk about and discuss for at least 2 or 3 more hours. I just have very few points. One, when you try to keep the rhyme scheme, why do you have to? The significance of a particular rhyme scheme in one language is certainly not identical with the same rhyme scheme in another language. Second, for example, in the translation of the second poem by Shakespeare, what you used was mustaf'ilun fa'ilun, mustaf'ilun fa'ilun, whereas I could easily claim that the music of the original would be closer to fa'ulun mafa'ilun, fa'ulun mafa'ilun, and not vice versa. When you come to the third one, by Tennyson, now what you have given us in the Arabic is very good for what it is, but I doubt whether it is actually communicatively equivalent in any way to the original of Tennyson. Now, when you come to the first point, you have given us a magnificent example, but a very rare one, for the unity of form and function and meaning and everything. And this, in fact, almost proves the translation of poetry in this way to be impossible, because you couldn't have done so had you not been a poet yourself. There is no doubt about it. Does that mean then that unless the translator is a poet, we should not approach the translation of poetry? And actually some poets themselves cannot translate their own poetry and think that if they translate it, they end up by creating a new creation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Thank you very much. First, just a short comment, because I believe that Dr. Abdullah Sahib is a poet by himself. Otherwise, he will not be able to create a new poem. Thank you very much. My first question is for Professor Zakaria. You are speaking about oral discourse, and most of your examples relate to political discourse analysis. So why you didn't call it political discourse analysis? And how about the written equivalence of the discourse markers, the oral discourse markers or spoken discourse markers? For example, when we say, so this is something relates to oral. How about the written equivalent? My second question is to Dr. Rafid about the legal translation. Don't you think that this relates the changing of the static nature of legal translation relates to the fact that language is moving, English language is moving, and the tendency towards the simplicity of the language is what pushes the translators to drop certain parts? And my final question is to Dr. Tahsin, which I believe that, he is just pinpoint, which in my opinion is very dangerous for the students of these universities in Jordan who study translation. Now you find the student believe the computer translator is his mind. The moment he loses it, it means that he cannot function, which I believe is very dangerous. Do you recommend the use of this equipment in pedagogical contexts? I used the speech recognition like 6 years ago, but they have their own limitations. And if you got flu, for example, the system will not be able to recognize your voice again. So how can you manage with this? Thank you very much.
The last maybe short question. Yes, I'll give you.
It's not a question, just comment. Yeah, I attended some translation in the asylum. Those people, refugees, are seeking asylum in UK. So sometimes the translator was embarrassed to translate. One of them, I remember, he was an Iraqi translator. He saw an Iraqi woman carrying a child. He said to her, "Grosil wala tkhallou yayyat." In order to get 6 months later, "Grosil wala tkhallou yayyat." So the translator was cheating in this time. Another one, the case of the killing of Iraqi citizens by British soldiers in Basra. The witnesses were illiterate. He asked him, "قد كانت المساحة فوازي?" He said, "شمرة عصا." Another question, what were they wearing? قال لي طوس لابسين طوس and helmet. So thanks a lot, thank you.
The gentleman over there, please, the last. Yes. Say no to you. Okay. Sure, please.
Just a very brief question to Dr. Sahib. Thank you very much. In fact, we enjoyed your magnificent and great translation of the poem. My question is, when you come across a figure of speech, metaphor or simile, do you think the translator has to translate as it is, or he tries to explain it? Thank you very much.
Okay. Yes. Yes.
That's our professor poem. In the poem part, we will forget him. Why did you think?
Sorry. Why did you think we should change the rhyme scheme of him, where you've given it the letter A, and in the second stanza you've given me, them, a D and E? So them and him, I think it should have the same letter A. Yeah?
I don't think so.
Okay. I think we have 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes to answer the questions, starting with Professor Abdul-Sahib and then moving this way.
All right. Concerning the loss of meaning, I'll come back to it. Concerning the loss of meaning, Dr. Manda.
Mike, please.
Okay, concerning the loss of meaning, this is inevitable in translation. Even when you translate inside the language, if you translate a poem into prosaic text or vice versa, you will suffer the loss of meaning definitely. This is inevitable. Can I produce the same, what Naida calls equivalent effect? That is, can I have the same, produce the same influence on the target language receptor as that of the source text on the source text receptor? I think this is possible, and I noticed that at least many of you were moved by the poems, and this means that I did, to some extent at least, succeed in conveying this kind of feeling. And it is always possible. رباعيات الخيال. Fitzgerald translated these poems, and Ahmed Rami translated these poems, and they are beautiful. You can feel them. أتدري لماذا يصبح الديك صائحا يردد لحن النوح في غرة الفجر يقول لقد مرت من العمر ليلة وأنت لا تعلم بها ولا تدري. What's more effective than this? So you can produce this, of course it depends on the language you use, the metaphor you use, the cadence, everything, even the sounds. بعدين العربية بها فضيلة ممتازة وهو أنه it can use both the sounds and the morphological patterns at the same time to generate a certain effect. مثلا قدمت وعفوك عن مقدمي حسيرا أسيرا كثيرا ضمي فعيلا. This is يعني the impact of language. And can any translator do that? It depends on whether you want to write your text as a poem or not. If you want to produce a poem, you have to be a poet. You have to know the rhyme scheme, you have to know the metrical system, you have to know what mechanics you use. And this line of verse that I have just read, حسيرا أسيرا كثيرا ضمي، هذا لم يأتي من فراغ. هو العرب يستخدمون حتى أصوات معينة لمعاني معينة. لم يطل ليلي، لاحظ اللام والميم والنون، لم يطل ليلي ولكن لم أنم ونفى عني الكرى طيف ألم، روحي يا عبد عني واعلمي أنني يا عبد من لحم ودم. So it depends on what kind of text you want to produce. You can produce a prosaic text if you like. وأنا قلت أن أحترم كل الترجمات اللي سبقتني حتى جبرة والآخرين كلهم وأبدعوا في نقل المعنى، ولكن أنا أعتقد أن القصيدة هي معنى ومبنى، هي form وcontent. وإلا لكان الشاعر كتب، كان المتنبي كتب نثر، أو شكسبير كان كتب نثر. لماذا يكتب شعر؟ لأنه في أشياء كثيرة في الشعر، في الرhythm internal rhythm، في rhythm يعني الموازاة في اللغة. يعني الشاعر لما قال يزيد معاوية يعتقد الوجه مثل الصبح مبيض والشعر مثل الليل مسود، ضدان لما استجمع حسنا والضد يظهر حسنه ضد، ولا ديكنا الوجه الصبح، الليل الشعر، والضد. This is a rhythm. I don't mean by rhythm يعني the music. No, these parallel structures in the language of poetry. Why keep the rhyme scheme? Why keep the rhyme scheme, right?
No, not right. No. That was not the question. It doesn't matter. We can discuss it later. That was not my question. That you said you are going to keep the same rhyme scheme. My question is
why?
Whether you really believe that the same community function will be of the rhyme scheme. Just like say, I mean, what about Ahmed Shawqi's Nahj al-Burda? A great poem, inspired by another poem, but it's not a translation of it, by the way. So you can still create a new creation, it's not a translation.
No, in that case it will be a kind of imitation. It will not be a translation. An imitation is a text which has only the title in common with the source text. I wanted to produce a poem similar in form and in meaning. It was a challenge for me. It's very demanding, by the way. It's painstaking. But why not? If I can do that, why not? Why not? Should the translator be a poet? As I said, yes, if you like, if you want to be a poet, to translate a poem into a poem, yes, you need to be a poet. And I can humbly say, I have some attempts. I'm not a poet. I don't want to publish. I write for myself and for my friends, for my family, but I don't publish really. I have a volume of poetry, but it's not published. I don't want to publish. A question was, am I a poet? Am I a poet? I answered that, I think. And methods of translating metaphor. There are many methods. You can translate a metaphor into another metaphor, but use a different image. A different image. يعني, jumping from the frying pan into the fire in English can be المسجر بعمر عند كربته كالمسجر من الرواء بالنار. Okay, so this is one method. You can translate a metaphor into a simile. You can translate a metaphor into a non-metaphorical expression. Many methods. You have to choose what suits the context. And the rhyme, I'll check that concerning the rhyme of this poem, but I think I worked hard enough on it to avoid falling into that mistake. I'll check it and probably tomorrow I'll tell you. Thank you very much, Amin.
Thank you. Dr. Nad, concerning your question of legal language, whether it is moving to something simpler or not. Of course, life is changing, and because language depicts life, it definitely changes. The legal field remained for a long time a secluded level with its own people knowing how to deal with it, but people were unable to deal with it. لماذا تقول ما لا يفهم ولماذا لا تفهم ما يقال؟ عندما كانوا يسألون أهل القانون لماذا تقولون ما لا يفهم ولماذا لا تفهمون ما يقال. Nowadays there is a growing tendency towards publicizing. لكن أكتب سؤال remain for a long time, as I said, a secluded. Nowadays there is an increasing tendency towards publicizing, democratizing whatever it is. This supreme identity of legal language towards more functional, something more understood by people. Yes, thank you.
I remember if I remember your question correctly, you talked about the various levels of competence. That is, people who are of speaking age, you and me, and younger and older, and those who have no problems in speaking, have different levels of competence in the pragmatics, in the use of language, how to get the point to the others. So that this is the first thing. As for ambiguity, see, ambiguity is not obfuscation. Ambiguity, you get ambiguity only when you can have more than one explanation for something. So that is, or more than one meaning, or as they say in syntax, more than one deep structure. If you get two or more deep structures for the same surface structure, then you have ambiguity through the application of various T rules on deletion and reorganization and whatever, and then you end up with a surface structure that it has two readings. Just as when you say, ذبحكم حلال. Can you see two readings?
This is a fun way.
ذبحكم حلال. That is, what you slaughter is good for us, or it's good for us to slaughter you. This is where, depending on what function. I'm not going to use Chomsky's example, flying planes can be dangerous, where it is planes that are flying can be dangerous, and for you to fly planes, that's ambiguity. But the other one is confusion. You don't know where you're going. That is, you get no